Hi, Crystal here from Christico Design. Today I'm going to show you how to crochet the Lunette Sun Hat. And to make this hat, you're going to need one ball of cotton yarn, about 186 yards. We won't use the full ball for all sizes, but for large adult you will. And I've used a couple of scraps for the stripes, which is totally optional for you. That's only about 10 or 15 yards of each color. I'm using a 5mm hook. Other notions you'll want are a measuring tape, yarn needle, scissors, and a stitch marker. I'll link up the tools and materials I'm using with my affiliate links in the description. We're going to start with the crown portion of our hat, which is worked in the round with single crochets, and we are not joining the round, so I'll show you how to do that. So to get started, we're going to start with a magic circle, single crochet 6 into the circle, pull this tail that we started with to close our circle, and instead of joining, we are going to just continue and mark our first stitch of each round. So I'm going to mark my first stitch here with my stitch marker. You can also leave a long tail and just thread that up through as you go, or use a different color yarn. And now for round 2, I'm single crocheting 2 into each stitch around for a total of 12. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches for round 2. I'm going to move my stitch marker up to the first stitch of round 3, which will be the next one I make. I'm just continuously crocheting into the next. For round 3, I'm going to single crochet into the first and mark that. And then I will put 2 single crochets in the next. And then I'm going to repeat that pattern around. Okay, so on these rounds I'm starting with 1 single crochet in the first, which means I will end with the 2 in the last in my increasing pattern. So that gives me round 1, round 2, and round 3. Now for round 4, I am going to single crochet in the first, and mark that stitch. then I am going to single crochet in the next. Then I will increase by adding 2 single crochets to the third. Then I will follow that pattern around. Single crochet, and then 2 single crochets. All right, so now I am going to start round 5. Take out my stitch marker, single crochet in my first stitch, place my stitch marker back in, and then for round 5 I will single crochet again and a third time, and then in the 4th stitch I will increase with 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Then I will follow that pattern back around. Now we're going to be working on the sides of our hat. This here is the crown circle that we started with, and I am modeling the toddler size for you here. So I am going to be starting row 14, which is where I start the V stitches, and showing you how that works. Your stitch counts may be different, but the process will be the same no matter which size hat you're working on. Okay, so I have pulled out my stitch marker and my first stitch is here, and I'm going to start with a slip stitch to the first one, and then I'm going to chain 4. This will count as a double crochet and a chain 1. In this same stitch I am going to double crochet, and now I have created my first V-stitch of the round. Now for these V-stitches we're going to skip 2 and then work another V-stitch here in this third one, and that is going to be a double crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet. There we go, 2 V-stitches made. So I'll just continue to follow that pattern around, skipping 2, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. All right, that brings us to the end of round 14 for the toddler size. So to finish, we have our last 2 stitches to skip, and then we're going to slip stitch to our chain space here, which is really our chain 4 that we started with. Okay, so there we go. We have a really nice join there that is not super apparent. It looks really good. Okay, so now for your next rounds, you are going to be V-stitching inside your V-stitches, basically. And to get that started, you'll continue with chain 4, oops, which counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. And then in that first chain space, we will double crochet and create our starting V-stitch for that round. Now we're going to skip over these and into the space here. We're going to create another V-stitch, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet all in that chain space. And that is what we will continue to repeat around. This part works up really fast on the sides. And here we are at the end of our second round of V-stitches. And we're just going to join in the same fashion as the first one, where we slip stitch to the chain space of our first V-stitch, kind of accentuating that space since it's really formed by chain 4. All right, and now we are going to repeat that row one more time for the toddler size. Check your pattern for specifics, but again, the process will be the same. Just continue to V-stitch around into each of those V-stitches and joining with a slip stitch to the chain space. Okay, so to end our previous round, we are slip stitching to the chain space of the first V-stitch we made. Then we're going to chain 1 and single crochet in that same space. And that's going to be our first stitch of the round. If you feel the need to mark it, you can do that. Sometimes that single crochet doesn't jump out at you there at first. Then I am going to chain 5. Like so. Then I will skip the next V-stitch, this one, and I will single crochet into the one after that, right over here. And that is going to connect my chain 5. So we have single crochet, skip a V-stitch, chain 5, single crochet into the next V-stitch. So now I am going to repeat that. 5 chains, skip a V-stitch, single crochet. Here, this will be an open. Skip, single crochet. Okay, that brings us to the end there. We have our last chain 5, our V-stitch to skip, and we're just going to take this one to the first single crochet we made, marked in our stitch marker, and we're going to slip stitch it there. There you go. There are your chain 5 spaces. Okay, now we are on our row just after our chain 5s and single crochets. And now we're going to continue our V-stitch pattern around. So the first thing we'll do is chain 4, and then we will double crochet in that same stitch, which is the single crochet that we made first, and we slip stitch 2. And that's going to make our first V-stitch of the round after our chain 5s. For me on the toddler hat, it is round 18 that I'm on. Then we are going to skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and in this middle center third chain in, we are going to V-stitch, which is going to be your double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. There you are. Then you will skip the next 2 chains and V-stitch into the single crochet that you used to join your chain 5s. Easy peasy. We're just going to repeat that around. V-stitch, skip 2, V-stitch, skip 2. So you'll be V-stitching in your single crochet and into the center stitch, center chain of your chain 5s all the way around. All right, ending a toddler hat round 18. It's our first row of V-stitches after the chain 5s. Slip stitch to your first V-stitch. Get some more yarn here. Chain 4 into the chain space of the previous V-stitch, double crochet, and that will be your first V-stitch. Now, just as in our previous V-stitch rows, we're going to V-stitch into our V-stitches around for this row and the next one. So 2 more rows of V-stitches, and then we will be ready to start our brim. I'd love for you to stop by and check out this crochet pattern on my blog, christacodesign.com. I share a lot of free crochet patterns, tutorials, and knitting as well. Ready to finish up the brim section. So the first round we're going to start with is single crochets around. We have slip stitch to our chain space of our V-stitch from the previous round. And I'm going to chain 1, and this is my chain that counts as my chain space, and this is my chain that counts as the top of my double crochet. So I'm going to go into that and single crochet for my single crochet round. So I'm going to chain 1 and my single crochet. Now we are doing continuous rounds in this hat, so we've been marking them with our stitch markers to make sure we keep up with that. Okay, so now I'm just going to single crochet into the chain space and then single crochet into the next double crochet, and I will continue that pattern around. I have 2 double crochets next to each other, so single crochet into the next one. Next I have a chain space, single crochet into that, single crochet into the double crochet. I'll just continue single crocheting, and until I get all the way back around. I've got 1 in each chain space and 1 in each double crochet. So continue single crocheting for this round. Okay, for the stripes on the brim, there are different ways to change colors. For the most seamless stripe, you'll want to cut your yarn and just slip stitch the rounds together and then rejoin your new color. But I also show you how to just continue in the continuous rounds with changing colors, and it does leave a little jog there, so that will be up to you. I might recommend you watch both ways if you're unfamiliar, and then you can decide and how to do your color changes.
Okay, so here I am on the last stitch of my first round of single crochets after all my V-stitches. And we are marking our first stitch because we're working continuously. I'm going to pull that out. I'm also going to change colors here. And so I'm just going to pull that new color through my last stitch. Pull that tight. And grab my new color. And for the next round, I'm going to be crocheting in the back loop only. So if you look at my first stitch, you have 2 loops on top. That's your front loop, that's your back loop. Front, back, front, back. So for this round, we're going into the back loop only. Here I'm skipping over my slip stitch in the back of my stitch, so those are not actual stitches. All right, so into the back loop, and this is going to close together to become our first stitch in our next round. So we're just going to single crochet into every single crochet, but we're only going into the back loop there. A little ball here. So there you can see the front loop is laying flat there in front. Let's keep going around into the back loop until we get back around to our first stitch marker, our first stitch that's marked. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our back loop only single crochet round, and I am going to do my last one there in the back loop only. I have my marked stitch, which is the first. So now this round I am going to be increasing to make my brim come out. So that will be first a single crochet under both loops like normal. I'm also going to grab these tails from my color change, this one on the bottom, and be crocheting over those as well. Okay, so 1 single crochet in the first. The next I'm going to increase with 2 single crochets. 1, 2, and again I'm going into both loops now. Oh, I should mark my stitch there. 1, 2, 3. See how easily that blends together. Done that before. Okay, so then we'll follow that pattern. 1 in the next stitch. Just going over my tails here. I crochet over them anytime I can. It's less to weave in. And then 2 into the next. 1 and 2. So follow that pattern around. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets over and over until you get back to the beginning. Okay, that brings me to the last stitch, which is 2 single crochets in 1, and you can see how it's starting to flare out here just like we want for our brim. So I'm going to put my 2 single crochets in that last stitch, and that is my first stitch mark there. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to change colors again. I just had a little bit of this camel color. It's one of my favorite Lion Brand 24/7 cotton colors. And then I'm going to put the jade on, take off my stitch marker. So I pulled through my new color through my last stitch and then work over my tails so I don't have to weave some of those in. And this next round, we are just going to single crochet in each round, actually this next couple of rounds, and we will go as large or as small as we want. Again, we are doing continuous rounds, so no need to join here. We'll just start right in the next stitch and work over both these tails as I change color, and mark my first stitch. There we go, and I will continue to single crochet around. Stay out of the way here. Put my new color tail on top and my old color tail on bottom so that they don't show through as easily. So you can see there my color change. And so this has been enough of a flare for the brim from everyone who's made it so far. Some people have made their brim with many, many more rows or a few less rows to make it bigger or smaller. But the more rows you add, the floppier it will get as well, which may or may not be what you're looking for, just be aware. You can also add more increases to go wider, but again, it will get floppier. If you find it's curling or waving too much as is, you can play around with where you increase. On that last row, I have you increasing every other one, and that is what worked for the pattern when I made it, and that has worked for everyone so far. But different tensions, different yarns can cause things to work out a little differently. So if you have to add your increases every 3 single crochets or even every one, then to get your desired look, then you can try that also. I haven't had anyone need to, but it could be. So as we go, you'll see it continues to flare out there, and it will just get bigger and bigger. It shouldn't wave or curl up too much. I know I crocheted my brim with a pretty tight tension on the adult hat I made. This one I'm not holding it as tight, mostly because I'm videoing this and we don't need anything to make it more challenging. But keeping the stitches really tight and close together can help keep it more compact too, but that can also cause things to work out a little differently as well. So again, for the last rows, now you're just single crocheting all the way around until you get your brim as wide as you like. Single crochets. So in our last stitch, and a single crochet, and then I'm just going to unclip the stitch marker and go right into that stitch for the next round of single crochets. Just wanted to show you the color change there. It will flatten out a little. You won't notice it as much as you go around. So we'll keep marking our stitches as we go around, our first stitches, and continue to increase the brim. You can see it's flaring nicely. It doesn't have too much wobble in it yet. Okay, so changing colors on the brim here where we have continuous rounds does not give you a smooth transition, which is not gonna bother me per se for this hat, but you might find it easier to do the slip stitch to the top of the first stitch of the round to have a better join for color changing. So to do that, I'm on my last stitch of this round. I already took out my stitch marker for my first stitch of the next. I'm going to pull through my new color, and I'm just going to pull down my first color to tighten it a little. And instead of just going into my first stitch of my next round like I have been doing, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go into that stitch, crochet over my tails again. So there you go. So now you'll have a slip stitch here, and when we get back around, we will slip stitch to the top of that first single crochet, which will make the join of these rounds smoother, and it'll line up your colors better. So if you plan on changing colors as you go through the brim section or any section where we've done continuous, you may want to go ahead and join with the slip stitch instead of continuous rounds so that your color changes are seamless and not so obvious. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my first one anyway, because that slip stitch can be confusing if you're not used to it, and since I've been doing continuous rounds, I might just keep going if I don't pay attention. So I'll show you how that looks when we get back around to that first stitch again. Okay, to finish up, I am going to slip stitch twice and do an invisible join. Again, I changed colors, and so instead of continuous rounds, I ended up doing joining with a slip stitch. But if you did continuous rounds, you would finish the same way. So now I am going to pull my yarn through, get my yarn needle, thread that. Now, instead of just finishing with the slip stitch join, I am going to go under both loops here of my next stitch. And I'm going to pull it closed, but not too tight. And then I'm going to come back over and go into this slip stitch. Just into the middle there and out the back loop. And what I'm doing there is forming a false stitch. So now that's done and finished. Let me zoom in just a little for you if we can. Nope. There we go. So you can see up close how that looks. And then I would just weave this in so that all my tails are done and my brim is finished. Hopefully you have loved this pattern as much as I have. Be sure to get the free pattern at christacodesign.com. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing your hats.
Be sure to like and subscribe so I can make more crochet videos.